Imagine the fear if you lived in an area where a serial killer is operating, randomly killing people for years, and is still at large.
Yeah, that would be wild,
never knowing where
bro, to
exactly.
be honest. Like, straight up, dude, if you grew up, like, if you're in an area where there's a serial killer, I bet that was the wildest thing. Like, I mean, they're still around today, but, like, in the 70s and the 80s when it was really, like, the golden era, like, I bet you that was so wild. Like, I couldn't even imagine, you know what I'm saying? Like, knowing that there's somebody, like, what's his name? BTK, for example. He was out on the run for, like, 30 years, right? And he was just somebody's neighbor, somebody's, like, church pastor or something like
They
that.
are,
Crazy,
or who they will
bro.
target next. In the US alone, there are dozens of active serial killers still on the loose in 2024, waiting to claim their next unsuspecting
See,
victim.
that's scary.
We're going to
How
be
do they
taking
get
a
away,
look at
like,
5
with that shit
suspected
nowadays,
serial
though?
killers from around the world who are likely still alive, but have never
Oh,
been
it's around the
apprehended
world.
for their heinous crimes. Lock your doors, and let's begin.
I'm telling you, like, in the 70s and the 80s, serial killers was in the golden era. Like, that's when all the most notable, infamous serial killers were doing their thing, you know? Those dudes are scary people, bro. Like Ted Bundy, Dahmer, you know, BTK,
Pedro
all
Lopez,
of them.
the monster of the Andes.
Pedro Lopez.
In 2005, there was controversy when the Guinness Book of Records listed Pedro Lopez as the most prolific serial killer. The dubious listing has now been removed from the book, but the killer has not been removed from the streets. Pedro Alonso Lopez was born into
He's
a large
on the
Colombian
run?
family in 1948. He had a difficult childhood. His mother was a sex worker, and his father was murdered in La Valencia 6 months before he was born. From the age of 8, he was homeless and wandered the streets of Bogota and was frequently sexually abused. At the age of 12, he was adopted by an American immigrant family, but fled after he was sexually assaulted by a teacher. He fell into petty crime and was jailed for car theft in 1969. Whilst in prison, he was attacked by 3 other inmates, who he later killed, although strangely, he only got 2 years for their murders. After his release in 1978, he travelled to
2
Peru,
years?
where he tried
For
to
murder?
abduct a 9-year-old girl from a local indigenous tribe. The tribe members retaliated and captured Lopez,
What the hell?
stripped him and buried him in sand. He was saved by a missionary, but was expelled from the country, but later claimed he killed over 100 girls there, mostly indigenous, and taken off the streets. In April 1980, the areas around
How was
Ambato,
he not
Ecuador,
in
were
jail?
hit by floods that uncovered the remains of several missing young girls. Lopez had been living in Ecuador, and authorities suspected he had killed the girls, and he was arrested after he tried to abduct a 12-year-old girl. In custody, he refused to speak, but eventually confessed to an undercover prison.
I don't get how he's still how he's not in jail with all of these, like, interactions with the cops, getting arrested, all of this stuff. Like, how did he not get a life sentence or, like, a long ass sentence for all these kidnappings and whoop de whoop? You know what I'm
That he had
saying? Like,
killed over
what?
200 in Ecuador, 100 in Peru, and many more in Colombia. His modus operandi was to lure young girls away from the public spaces with a gift, before attacking them and killing them with his bare
looks like-
hands.
He
He also
like a
claimed
weird
he
guy, bro,
occasionally
straight
exhumed the
up.
bodies from their burial site and had tea parties with their corpses. His motive, he claimed, was because he was abused as a young
What
boy
the f-
and aimed to do the same to as many girls as he
Tea
could.
parties with their
After
corpses.
confessing to authorities and leading them to the burial sites of 53 of his victims, he was convicted of murder in 1980 and sentenced to 16 years in prison.
You're telling me bro got 53, he murdered 53 people? He murdered 53, he took them to all 53, and he got 16 years in prison for murdering 3 people? 16 years in prison. What the like, who's the judge? I don't care, I get this in Colombia, but still 16 years in prison for murdering 53 people? That's insane to me, bro.
Incredibly,
What?
this was the maximum prison sentence available in Ecuador at the time. In August 1994,
Ecuador, not Colombia.
Lopez was
That's
released
the
2 years
maximum
early
is
and
16
was deported.
years? Released 2 years early too? 16 years though is crazy. 53 people, gang.
to Colombia and detained as
What?
an illegal immigrant on arrival. But unable to make a case against him, Lopez was instead declared insane and admitted to a mental hospital. In 1998, Lopez was released and immediately disappeared. The last reported sighting of him was in September 1999, when he visited the National Civil Registry to renew his citizenship card. It's rare to know the identity of a serial killer, and for him to still be free in the community, but that is exactly what happened to the monster of the Andes. Despite being a
I don't
suspect
get
in a
that,
number of
bro.
murders, Lopez remains a fugitive, even to this day. He'd be 75 at the
He's
time of this
probably dead
video,
by now,
and as
bro.
far as anyone knows, he is still very much alive and potentially continues to kill, but no one knows where.
16
Danny
years is
Lovsky
crazy,
maniac.
though, bro, for 53 people.
Russia has seen its
Russia,
fair
what?
share of atrocities over the years.
Yeah.
Bombings, war zones, radiation emergencies, and serial killers. In fact, Russia is second to only the US when it comes to the number of serial killers. However, there is one perpetrator who has continually evaded capture. Known as the Maniac with Dull Eyes, or the Danilovsky Maniac, this unknown individual is responsible for the murders of at least 7 women between 2004 and 2007. All of his victims were young, some with the same first name, were all strangled with a makeshift garrote, and disposed of inside abandoned
That's crazy.
buildings or construction sites around the city of Cherepovets. The killer on each occasion was careful to cover his tracks before leaving a unique calling card on the walls of each crime scene, crude outlines of pornographic drawings
That's
in black
gross.
chalk. Understandably, the city, and especially young women, were in fear of when the maniac would strike again. Over the course of 18 months, he had taken the lives of 6 victims, when suddenly the killing stopped. For 2 years, the maniac stopped, and the local people breathed a sigh of relief, believing he was maybe dead, imprisoned for another crime, or resumed his killing spree in a different area. However, on June 11, 2007, a 17-year-old girl walked along a forest belt near the Oktyabrskaya Bridge when she was abducted in broad daylight and murdered. Fears of the maniac's
That's
revival
wild,
began
dog.
to creep in, and sadly, when police found Natea's remains in a local park, the fears were confirmed. On this occasion, however, a number of eyewitnesses caught sight of a man near to where Natela had been abducted, and police finally had some identifiable features. He was between 30 and 50 years old, quite short and stocky, with balding brown-grey hair, with
Did he say, no, he said 30 and 50. I was like 13 and 15? No, he said 30 and 50. I bet you he probably looked just like that too.
dull, soulless eyes and
I bet
glasses.
you anything.
A composite sketch of the perpetrator was drawn up and distributed around the city, and a reward was offered to anyone who could help catch the maniac. After his 7th murder, the maniac disappeared again, and has never been seen or heard from since. There was another murder in November 2011, when a 19-year-old student disappeared, and her corpse was found a year later in a hole behind an empty building. But despite the obvious similarities, this death was never officially linked to the maniac. So today, unless he is locked up or dead, the Danilovsky maniac is still at large, possibly biding his time before he strikes again.
That's just crazy.
The
to me,
Eastbound
bro.
Strangler. In the autumn of 2006, a serial killer was on the loose in Atlantic City. The first known victim, 35-year-old Kim Raffo, was found by 2 women who stumbled upon her remains behind the now demolished Golden Key Motel. The motel was located along a 5-lane stretch of Route 40 known as the Black Horse Pike. The motel already had a seedy reputation and was frequently used by sex workers. On November 20th, more victims were found, the bodies of 23-year-old Tracy Ann Roberts, 42-year-old Barbara Brador, and 19-year-old Molly Diltz were all found discarded in a water-filled drainage ditch at the back of the same hotel. All four were fully clothed
Crazy. At a
except for their
hotel, there's
feet,
no
which
cameras?
the perpetrator used to anchor them to the sides of the ditch so they wouldn't float away. Their bodies were meticulously staged, with their arms stretched out and their heads pointing east, giving birth to the sinister nickname, the Eastbound Strangler. The women were placed about 320 feet apart, and no attempt to cover them had been made.
That's insane.
Atlantic City
Bro, you're telling
detectives
me
believed the
put them
murders were committed by one man, and individually killed and dumped over a 5-week period. Because the victims were out in the open and diligently displayed, investigators ruled out any link with the Long Island serial killer, also known as the Gilgo Beach, who murdered several women between 1990 and 2011. He was free to kill for many years until June 2024, when a Manhattan architect named Rex Heuermann was charged with 6 of the murders.
June 24th.
Initially,
This
the
year,
murders
bro,
caused
June,
panic in the
wow.
area, and the motel was nicknamed the Motel from Hell. But the killer remained elusive, despite extensive work by detectives.
But what
Criminal
if it was him,
profiler
though,
John
you know?
Kelly
You never know.
believes the killer has a foot fetish and possibly killed as part of some kind of religious ritual. Here is part of the detailed criminal profile he put together of the killer. He believes the perpetrator is a local male who is familiar with the Atlantic City area and the disposal site of his victims. He has a very organized personality, which influences his personal and everyday activities, including his work. He is very rigid and structured in his everyday life. He likely has a foot fetish with a collection of women's shoes and socks, and is antisocial and narcissistic. In his pre-offensive mode, he may have spoken about the sinful nature of prostitution, or he may have voiced economic concerns about prostitutes destroying Atlantic City's value or reputation. In his post-offensive mode,
Yeah, that's crazy, bro.
he would
I
say
bet you
things like,
might-
"They got what they deserved," or "good riddance." The killer likely
He
follows
might- bro,
news
what
about
if it
his
was
murders, has a prior
list
record of
killer or
sexual or
whatever, Long
physical
Island
abuse
serial
towards
killer.
women,
But
and is
what if they
likely
just can't
detached
put
from
it
his
together
father
to-
and
that it
abused as a
wasn't?
child.
Or that it was him, they just
To
can't put it
date,
together. you
there
know what
hasn't
I'm
been
saying?
any update on DNA recovered from the scene, or if it has been
There's
tested
no, like-
using the latest advancements.
No evidence
Kelly
or
believes
no like
the
witnesses
perpetrator
that saw
likely
him or
killed
anything.
before and after the 4 victims were found. As happens with some serial killers, he may be going through a cooling off period. Maybe he got married, had a child, or is locked up for a different offence. What is known for sure is the Eastbound Strangler is still at large in 2024, and assuming he is still alive, is free to kill again. Tips can be sent to johnkellyprofiler@gmail.com, your local police department, or the Atlantic City Police Department at 609-347-5780.
Could you imagine though if one of these fools is watching this fucking video too, or watched the video? That would be wild. Like they're like, oh yeah, I forgot.
Chicago
You know what I'm saying?
Strangler.
Like that, like the Chicago Strangler. Like
Since 1999 in Chicago, Illinois, at least 50 women, predominantly black, have been murdered in a strikingly similar way. Despite what seems conclusive evidence, the Chicago police deny that a single person is behind all the slayings,
yeah, bro.
and
Imagine
that a
they
serial
watched
killer
this
is
video.
terrorizing the city streets. However, what is clear is an alarming amount of women have been murdered, and hardly any of them have been solved. To put that into perspective, between 1999 and 2018, 75 women between the ages of 18 and 58 were strangled to death in Chicago, but only 24 have been solved. All the unsolved cases have similarities. All the women were found dumped in abandoned buildings or alleyways in the south and west side of Chicago. Around half of them were sex workers, and the majority were black. Some victims were raped and beaten, others were bound and gagged. Some of them had plastic bags tied over their heads. Most were stripped of their clothing, and some were set on fire. One thing is for sure,
That's nuts,
they all
bro.
met
Setting
brutal
someone on
ends.
fire is fucking wild, bro.
Each of these women had family who are grieving and children who have lost their mother. Despite the frequency and violence of these murders, few have garnered significant media attention. They are often only briefly mentioned as a woman being thrown into the trash or left in an abandoned building. Many people believe that a single serial killer, dubbed the Chicago Strangler, is responsible. Thomas Hargrove, the founder of the Murder Accountability Project, holds the belief that there is a pattern in the Chicago Strangler case that the police are overlooking. Hargrove established MAP in 2015 after searching the serial killer
Isn't that-
Gary
what's his
Ridgway,
name?
who was responsible for the deaths
Yeah.
of as many as 70 people before his arrest in
The Green River
2001.
Killer, whatever.
It took the police a considerable amount of time to recognize that Ridgway was the sole perpetrator. The majority of the victims were found out.
Look, and when you think serial killers, that's exactly what you think of a serial killer look like that fool, right? Because they got the weird ass, big ass glasses. They all like look like weirdos, you know? But some of them just look like normal people, bro, and you wouldn't even be able to tell. Like, you can tell a little bit if you, like, understand how they move. Because they're all psychopaths, bro. They can all just sit there in your face, be normal, totally fine, and then when they're behind the scenes, bro, whole different person up there, bro. You know what I'm saying? It's
Doors,
crazy.
often in alleyways or abandoned properties,
crazy.
which is quite unusual. About
Just be
3/4 of the
careful,
victims had clear signs of a sexual motive to their deaths. Most of them were found partially clothed or naked, and Hargrove finds it hard to believe that 51 women were killed by 51 separate men or women. Strangely, the killing stopped
51 people? If y'all are linking him to 51 people and you still haven't caught him, y'all ain't doing your job. There's no way you didn't leave one drop of evidence. There's no way he didn't. You know what I'm saying? Like, one fingerprint or one shoe print or I don't know, something. Like, there's no
2014.
way.
Only to start again in 2017. This has been seen with other serial killers when they are briefly incarcerated for different crimes or go many years without striking again. The Chicago police have met with Hargrove and studied his data, but are still not convinced that they are looking for an individual serial killer. DNA evidence collected from the scenes have indicated at least 21 different individuals are responsible. This means that potentially 21 killers are in the Chicago area who have yet to be apprehended. So what's going on here?
Oh, they're way
51
more than
women
that, bro.
murdered. None of them have been solved. Many people believe this is the work of a serial killer. But regardless, whether one person or many is
If
responsible
you
for
put
these
in him
killings,
to
they are
51
potentially
people
still
and
out
he
there.
did 51 women and you still ain't caught him, I'm telling you, bro,
The
you
Little Rock
are
stabber.
not doing your job. Little Rock, bro.
On April 29th, 2021, the police department posted a video on YouTube alerting its citizens in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, about a serial
21,
killer who was using a knife to
2021.
attack and brutally kill random individuals. The first murder occurred on Monday, August 24th, 2020, when 64-year-old Larry McChristian was stabbed to death on Gaines Street. Larry was not from
That's
Little
sad,
Rock,
bro.
but was in the city staying with his daughter, who was on probation. A few days before his murder, he had been taken to the emergency room by ambulance, but was released at around 6 a.m. on the 21st of August. The hospital tried to reach his daughter by phone, but were unable to, and so they gave Larry a bus token and information about homeless shelters. When her father failed to come home, his daughter alerted police, and 2 days later they found Larry's body and were able to identify him from his hospital discharge papers. Eerie CCTV captured the attack and showed the perpetrator standing over
No
Larry,
way.
watching him die. A second murder occurred
No
on Wednesday,
way,
September
bro.
23rd, 2020. Again, the victim was an older man, aged 62, named Jeff Welch. He was found in an abandoned house, often used by the homeless. Despite the victim having multiple stab wounds, the
No
police did not
way
view
they
the
got him
incident as
again.
murder. They also incorrectly described him as black. On April 11th, 2021,
What?
Deborah Walker survived an
How
attack
did
by the
they do
Little Rock
that?
stabber. Deborah was stabbed at least 15 times in a frenzied attack. Walker, who was known to the police for various crimes, told the police her attacker was a black male. However, it would later be revealed that she knew who attacked her. The day after the Walker attack, Marlon Franklin, age 40, was found dead on an overpass near 2710 Wright Avenue. She'd been stabbed multiple times. Several residents believed the serial killer was a man known as Juggler, who had pulled a knife on residents in the past and was known as a stalker. Juggler had been caught on CCTV, and his real name was known by residents, his third victim, and more importantly the police.
What?
The alleged killer is said to be in his late 40s. He is known to be a prolific drug user who has been detained due to his mental health. He has served 2 prison terms for domestic violence. The case
Well, if
garnered
you
attention
got-
across social media websites
Y'all
and has
got
led
his
local
name and everything?
vigilantes and self-proclaimed real-life superheroes, known only as Tothian, Master Legend, and Shadow Vision, to announce that they would hunt down the man responsible for the killings. But crucially, despite numerous witnesses and the survivors
Bro, if y'all know he been in prison and all this shit, like, shouldn't y'all, like, be able to find him pretty easy then? Have his pictures
giving his
blasted
name,
on the
he has not been arrested in
wanted file or
connection with any
whatever?
of the attacks. Today, in 2024, his exact whereabouts are unknown, and if he chooses, it seems he is free to continue his killing spree. So that's it for this video. That's 5 serial killers.
Bro, that is wild, dog. Like, there's 5 serial killers. 2 of them are different countries. 3 of them are from fucking the U.S., of course. You know what I'm saying? I think 1 was from Ecuador, 1 was from Russia, and then 3 were from the U.S. That's wild, though. That 53 people, that first one where he killed 53 people and he got 16 years in life or 16 years in prison is wild to me, bro. Wild as hell. But I don't know, man. That shit still blows my mind. But if y'all watch this all the way to the end, bro, I appreciate you. See you in the next one, chat.